Hello, Goodson Middle School students. We are here for a live chat on U.S. history, Unit 1 topics for our test tomorrow. Sorry, just a moment. Victor, please go ask Daddy, okay? So, sorry, just a second. Can somebody please go help Victor with the TV? Okay, so we're giving everybody just about another minute to get on. Okay, we're giving everybody just about another minute to get on, and then we will get started. I would highly recommend, if you haven't got it with you yet, make sure you have your spiral with you. You want to have your spiral with you. We'll refer to that several times. Okay. All right. Well, it's 6:31, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to refer to a couple of pieces of information in our spiral. First of all, I did make a spiral video earlier today, and that can be referred to make sure that your spiral is up to date with everything you need. On page 5 of our spiral, it might be slightly different for the other classes, but it should be around page 5 of our spiral. We have our TEKS questions. These questions are an excellent starting place for reviewing for the test. But as we get started, I do want to make one request. Please do not use the chat app as a place to socialize. That is for asking questions. Okay, if too many people start just chatting on there and saying hello, it goes too quickly and I'm not able to catch when people actually have a question related to the content material. I mean, if you've already said something, you don't have to retract it. But sorry, I have students from last year popping up in the chat. But we just want to keep it empty just so that we can make sure that, and if somebody asks the question, they get the chance to have that question answered and not overlooked. So once again, we're going to start with these questions. It's a great place to start when you're reviewing. And I would suggest that as we review, check and see if you can answer some of those questions better. And if there's any questions left at the end that you don't think you can answer from that TEKS question list, then go ahead and ask those questions in the chat. We're going to just start at the beginning of sort of our information. Okay, we're going to just sort of start at the beginning of information. And with our regions. So we started off the year talking about our regions map. That was on page 7. And we had 2 maps that we were talking about with our geography, a regions map and a geography map. So in our spiral, we should have a large regions map with notes on it and a smaller geography map with the geographic features of the United States. So what I want to talk about is hit a couple of highlights. There are 6 regions of the United States. That name is, it's just called Geography Maps is what that page is named. And it's just a long worksheet. Okay. So it's just a worksheet, a long worksheet, and it's just the geography maps. And the big one is the region. So the extra long one is the region. And there's the major regions that you want to know. What I've been telling my students is the story of the United States history is going to start in the East. So we are going to focus on the East for our lessons. And as we focus on the east coast of the United States, okay, when we focus on the east coast of the United States, we hit two regions right off the bat. The first region that we hit is the Appalachian Mountain region. So we hit this Appalachian Mountain region here in the north, and then we have the Atlantic Coastal Plain in the south. Okay. I'm not going to answer questions about how many questions are on the test or things like that. This is to review content. Okay. So Appalachian Mountain regions and the Atlantic Coastal Plains. So one of the big things is knowing the difference between those two regions. And it's a pretty stark difference. They're almost opposites. They're almost opposites. So it's right there on the East Coast. And the Appalachian Mountain region is obviously named after the Appalachian Mountains. And then the Atlantic Coastal Plain is named after the Atlantic Ocean. So we see again those two major things. The first ocean that they crossed and the first barrier that they ran into. And the Appalachian Mountain Range is obviously mountains. It's cold. The soil is bad. The soil is bad. And they're mostly like fishing. They do there's the fishing, shipbuilding. You're gonna have lumber because there's a lot of trees. And then in the south there, it's warm, good soil, slow rivers, and they're going to be planting things. All right, so we have these two regions that are sort of the opposite. We have these two regions that are sort of the opposite. You have the Appalachian Mountain region. It's got mountains, it's cold, bad soil. They cannot farm for money. So to make money, they go fishing, they cut down trees for lumber. They'll do a little bit of coal mining. Somebody brought that up a little bit, but that's not as big a deal in this time period. We're really talking about the lumber, the fishing, whale oil. And then in the south, their weather is great. They have really good soil. It's perfect for growing things. This is the Appalachian Mountain region. Appalachian Mountain region in the northern area, and then the Atlantic Coastal Plain in the south. I know that last year, last year, y'all talked a lot about the Gulf Coastal Plain because that's where Houston is. And the Gulf Coastal Plain is very, very similar to the Atlantic Coastal Plain. So if you're asked a question about which region is warm and has a good climate and is good for growing things, long growing season, you're going to be in the Atlantic Coastal Plain or the Gulf Coastal Plain. And if you're asked about it's cold, it's rocky, the soil's really sort of in that, and there's fishing. That's when you're in the Appalachian Mountain region. And that's really where we're going to kind of keep our focus. The next thing we talked about, why are all the regions different? Because they have different geographies. So the farther north you get, the colder it gets. The farther south you get, the warmer it gets. It's part of the way that the climate of the earth works. It's actually where science affects history. When you have mountains, you have a lot of rocks, it makes the soil bad. When you have a lot of slow moving rivers, all of the water helps make that soil really, really good. So, yeah, they fish all along the Atlantic. It is not open note. Okay, it is not open note. The big ninja, the big things that you need to know in terms of the differences in the regions are that that Appalachian Mountain region, it's you need to know the difference between the fact that it's cold, it's rocky soil, they can't grow anything. Atlantic coastal plains, they grow stuff. So the whole concept, the big concept to take away here is that the geography of wherever you are defines what economic activities are going to take place. The geography of wherever you are defines what economic activities are going to take place. If you end up like the Pilgrims, blown off course and landing in the Appalachian Mountain region, you can't grow tobacco. It doesn't grow there. It won't work. So you got to find a different way to make money. You can chop down all the trees. They got a lot of trees. Chop down the trees, send the wood to England. If you're in the Atlantic coastal plain, you can't mine for gold. There's no gold there. That's not the geography of the land. It doesn't exist. It won't get you anywhere. You can also think of it like the location is always going to define activity. Location is always going to define activity. So the geography affects the economic activity. So those two major regions you need to know, the Appalachian Mountain region and the Atlantic coastal / Gulf coastal region. That whole, it goes all the way from the Atlantic all the way around to the Gulf Coast. That's all sort of one region. And just those two differences, and then the overall idea that the economic factors involved are decided based on the geography. The geography affects the economy. Ridley, yes, the Puritans made money from lumber and fishing, primarily, when they needed to. The Puritans weren't super interested in making money. They were just there for the religious freedom. But when they needed to make money, they started doing it with lumber and fishing. In terms of the regions, there's not a lot of ways to remember it other than if you can remember that mountains are pointy and they have rocks and they're cold. And plains are flat, so they're good for growing. So if you get mountains are pointy, so they're good for, they have rocks. Okay, and plains are flat, so they're good for growing things. So that would be the tip for that. Let's move on to the geographic features. I have a couple tips for remembering the geographic features. So there's two ways for remembering geographic features. The first one I've done with my class. I don't know if anyone else did it with their class. And that is a series of gestures. So we remember that it's the story of goes from east to west, and we do Atlantic Ocean, Appalachian Mountains, Ohio, Mississippi, Missouri, Rocky Mountains, Pacific Ocean. And what that is I tell my students you can do like this. You put A M R P. AAMRP. So I would actually brain dump. This is one of the things I would brain dump on the test as soon as I get the test. We get the test. We get the test, and you should brain dump this right away. Okay, AAMRP. Okay, guys, I am going to ask. I'm going through all the topic material right now. Can we hold questions until we get to that topic area? So right now we're talking about geographic features. We will get to Jamestown and we will get to Plymouth. Okay. AAMRP. And then you want an arrow that goes like this. This is one of the first things you should write on your test. This is one of the first things you should write on your test. AAMRP. It's Atlantic, Appalachian, Mississippi, Rocky, Pacific. And then you put the arrow starting at the A. We start at the beginning of the alphabet. Okay. We put the arrow starting at the A, starting at the beginning of the alphabet. And now we remember they cross the Atlantic Ocean and they're stopped by the Appalachian Mountains. On our quiz this week, this was still a question that was being missed by many students. Is what ocean did they cross? The Atlantic Ocean. We always start at the beginning of the alphabet. We're going to cross the Atlantic Ocean. We're going to stop at the Appalachian Mountains. Cross the Atlantic Ocean, stop at the Appalachian Mountains. That's the story we're telling right now. Later this year, we'll spread slowly this way, but right now, this is not as big a deal. Okay, and we want to remember Mississippi is the one that goes straight up and down. Okay, so it's Ohio River, Mississippi River, Missouri River. Ohio River, Mississippi River, Missouri River. So those are our geographic features that we need to know. Those are our geographic features that we need to know. Okay. All right. Next, we're going to go on to our next topic that we talked about in class was 1607, Jamestown. I'm just going to double check that. So we did our geography. We talked about our geography maps. Okay. And then we go into, European colonization first. The P is Pacific and the R is the Rocky Mountains, Pacific Ocean. Okay. Atlantic, Appalachian, Mississippi, Rocky, Pacific. Okay. Yes, mountains and basins is a barrier to movement because it's a giant desert that gets over 100 degrees almost every single day. However, that is not important to what we're talking about right now. So don't worry about that too much. Okay. All right. So European colonization. When we get a question on why are Europeans colonizing things, what are the reasons for European colonization? You always start with the big G's. Okay, glory, God, and gold. Why are they colonizing things? Okay, because they're such G's. Glory, God, and gold. Okay, Ninja, the difference between the Appalachian Mountain region is it's mountains and it's cold and they fish and they do lumber. And the Atlantic coastal plains is flat and they grow things. Please rewatch the first 10 minutes of this video. Okay, so the 3 G's, glory, God, and gold. Anytime, then they're not going to word it glory, God, and gold. Instead of God, they might say religious freedom. Instead of glory, they might say make the country bigger. Instead of gold, they might say accumulate wealth or acquire natural resources. But anytime you see a question about why are they going, you want to start the 3 Gs. What are the reasons for exploration? 3 Gs. Try to match the G's to each option that you have and see which one fits. Okay, so that's the basics. And then obviously we talk about 3 different countries that colonized. We talk about England, France, and Spain. Okay, and with France, we have a really easy memorization technique that we do. And that's France, friends, fur. So whenever you're talking about colonization and you're talking about France, it's France, friends, fur. They're the only ones that are friends with the Native Americans, and they're looking for fur. So fur is what they're economically doing. They're hunting the animals and selling their fur, and they're friends with the Native Americans. Spain is killing the Native Americans off. England is taking their land. France is friends with the Native Americans. So that's one of our big memory techniques you can utilize here as a strategy on your test. So if you see something about colonization and they're asking about France, you put FFF, France, friends, fur. Okay. And then the other big thing is, while Spain is the country that certainly killed the most Native Americans, the number one killer of Native Americans during this time period is disease. Okay. So disease is the number one killer of Native Americans during. So remember that if they ask what kills the most Native Americans, it's actually disease. It's kind of a trick question. You're like, ooh, Spain, but it's not who, it's what. Disease killed the Native Americans. And you can say that Spain brought the disease in, or France brought the disease in, or England brought the disease in, but it was the disease that killed them. So everybody's dying of disease. Remember, they got disease in Jamestown, disease in Plymouth, disease. We're killing the Native Americans. Okay. So moving on to 1607. 1607 is the founding of Jamestown. And that has, it's the first permanent English settlement. And they were looking for gold. There was no gold. And instead, what they end up is they grow tobacco. And growing that tobacco has two effects. The first effect is that the colony gets rich. And the second effect is that slavery will increase. And we'll talk about slavery a little bit more when we talk about triangle trade in just a moment. But one of the effects is that slavery will increase. Jamestown grew tobacco. Jamestown grew tobacco. Because remember, they land on the Atlantic coastal plain. Jamestown is on the Atlantic coastal plain. They land in the Atlantic coastal plain. They're looking for gold. Gold does not exist in the Atlantic coastal plain. So you can't find gold where none exists. So they end up growing tobacco to make money. Okay, they end up growing tobacco. And they get large enough that they need to have their own government. So they found the House of Burgesses, which is the first representative government. Phantom and Opera, it's primarily tobacco that we're talking about. In 1607, tobacco is what saved the colonies. As more people move to the south, they'll grow other things. But at 1607, we're talking about tobacco. The Jamestown people landed in Jamestown, Virginia, which is in the south. A representative government is when you elect people to make the laws on your behalf, to make the laws for you. So like we have representatives today. So like I elect someone to go to Congress and Congress writes the laws. I elected them, they represent me. One way you can think about this is Burgesses sounds a lot like burgers, but there's an R missing. There's the R right there in representative. Okay, there's the R right there in representative. Lance, we'll get to that's the Mayflower Compact. They landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts, which is in the Appalachian Mountain regions, and we'll get to more on that in a minute. Okay, so Jamestown, first permanent settlement. They grow tobacco. It makes them rich. It leads to slavery. They get the House of Burgesses, which is the first representative government. And again, Burgesses sounds a lot like burgers, but it's missing an R. Oh, where's the R? It's right here in representative government. So you can kind of use that to help you remember that burger. It should be burgers. So you have an R that you're missing. You got to find the R. First representative government. Okay. Next, we'll talk about 1620. This is the boat Plymouth. The Mayflower is the name. There's 3 names in this story, and so it gets a little confusing. They come on a boat The name of the boat is the Mayflower. They get here, they sign a paper called the Mayflower Compact. Then the city or the town is called Plymouth. So sometimes a test will refer to it as Plymouth, and sometimes they'll refer to it by the Mayflower Compact. You need to understand that Plymouth is the location and the Mayflower Compact is the document. The House of Burgesses is so important because it's the first representative government. It's the first time we had that. It's still our government today. So it's a model of government that we're going to follow for a very long time. So it's first representative government, first time that the people were electing others to represent them and their voices and their issues, to write laws on their behalf. Usually the king just kind of got to pick who was writing the laws. Yes, it's called the Mayflower Compact because they wrote it while they were still on the boat. They weren't very creative people. They didn't want to make up a fancy name for their agreement, so they just called it the Mayflower Compact because we're writing it on the Mayflower. Okay, so the Pilgrims, which is a general term, and more specifically, we tend to call them the Puritans, come to Plymouth and they sign Lisby. No, it's Jamestown, then Burgesses, then Plymouth. If you look at the dates, because your hot dates are 1607 and 1620. So you need to know 1607 is Jamestown, 1620 is Mayflower Compact. Right in the middle there, at 1619, that's where House of Burgesses is sitting. Okay. And it's called the Mayflower Compact because it was short. Yeah, it's compact. Okay. And they signed the Mayflower Compact. And the Mayflower Compact is literally just a document that has really fancy language that says, hey, we're all good people here and we want to have a good colony. So let's all follow some laws and like not, like kill each other and steal stuff. Everybody good with that? Yeah, let's all sign it. That's what the Mayflower Compact is. Okay. In more fancy social studies vocabulary, so the Pilgrims, more specifically the Puritans. A lot of people get confused. Well, which is it, the Pilgrims or the Puritans? Y'all, there's more than one type of sandwich. You could have a ham sandwich, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a sub sandwich, a roast beef sandwich. There's more than one type of pilgrim. You could have a Puritan, you could have a Quaker, you could have a Catholic. Right now, the only pilgrims we have talked about are Puritans. The only pilgrims we have talked about right now are Puritans. So if they are talking about Catholics and Quakers and whatever else on the test, the only one we've talked about is Puritans. Okay. Burgesses is just an old word that means representative in England. Okay. So, Ninja, the difference between between Plymouth and Jamestown is that they're two different cities. They're two different places. Okay. So Jamestown is founded to make money. Plymouth is founded for religious freedom. Jamestown is founded to make money. Plymouth is founded for religious freedom. Jamestown grows tobacco and has the House of Burgesses. Plymouth has the first Thanksgiving, grows some food and has a Thanksgiving with the Native Americans, and they have the Mayflower Compact. 1620, the Pilgrims who are going to Plymouth are the ones who are Puritans. Don't worry too much about the exact religious specifications of what counts as a Puritan. They're a form of Christian. All you need to know is that they're a Christian group who didn't like England and they moved over here for religious freedom. Cringy boy, literally. This group right here, this is the group that moved over for religious freedom. Okay. No, we're not going to name all the types of pilgrims right now. That would be very distracting. The only pilgrim we care about right now is Puritan. The only pilgrim we care about right now is Puritan. Yes, Plymouth is for freedom. Jamestown is for money. Plymouth is for freedom. Jamestown is for money. Plymouth is for freedom. This information should be able to be found in our notes on pages 13 and 15 of our spiral. Found in our notes on pages 13 and 15 of our spiral. Yes, Injun, what are the major reasons for colonization? It's glory, God, and gold, the 3 Gs. Okay. The Jamestown people moved for gold. They wanted money. They were thinking they were going to get rich quick. They were looking for gold. They didn't find any gold, so they planted tobacco. Okay. We need to say one more thing about the Mayflower Compact, because this is an incredibly important document. Just understand, we're at 1607 and 1620, and we're having some very important government things going on. 1619, you have the House of Burgesses, first representative government, Burgesses representative. The Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. The Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. And I've been having some students write it like this to help them remember. Okay. MCSCSG. Yes, the Mayflower Compact is self-government. So it's a social contract, and social, like all the people, got together and talked, and it's a contract because they signed it. So they got together and talked and signed it. Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. Self-government means they get to make their own local decisions. So for instance, if the students in a classroom were allowed to decide what the classroom rules were, you still have to follow the district rules, but you could make up the classroom rules. That would be self-government. No, this is not an open note test. This is not an open note test. Okay. So this is just a way of remembering it. If you see something on the Mayflower Compact, you may want to go ahead and write MC, SC, SG. MC, SG, SC. Okay. So that's just a method of remembering that. I'm not going to speculate on the types of tests we may have in the future. Let's focus on the one we got tomorrow. All right, here we go. So, thank you, Mr. Brocken. Point well made. Okay. So the next topic that we talked about was triangle trade. The next thing we talked about was triangle trade. Triangle trade, the basis of triangle trade is, in fact, a triangle. The fundamental concept is that there are these patterns of trade that started to emerge naturally. These natural patterns of trade that started to emerge as the colonies got bigger and bigger. And the colonies would send raw goods to England, and they would get manufactured goods. These notes should be on page 18 and 19 of your spiral. If you have not used the phrases raw goods and manufactured goods, if you have not used the phrase raw goods and manufactured goods, then you need to make sure you use that in your notes, because that is the basis of what they would write on a test. They're not going to say, oh, they needed the basic stuff and they needed the finished stuff. They're going to use the phrases. Okay, if you don't have 18 and 19, it's just whatever pages you've ended up with. Does mercantilism and triangle trade notes. I saw somebody ask about the types of colonies. We're going to come back to that in just a second. So this worksheet right here and this worksheet right here. Okay. If you're in a K-level class, you may not have this worksheet. You may have just looked at the worksheet and written the answers directly into your spiral. Okay. So that's just something, just look for those worksheets. It's the one with the 2 continents and the triangles. So the colonies are sending raw goods. England is sending manufactured goods. They're sending guns and iron to Africa. And Africa is sending slaves to the colonies. The most important pieces of it, so triangle trade is just a path trade that emerges. People start to notice, hey, they seem to be going back and forth with the same types of things over and over and over again. No, triangle trade does not have anything to do with the Bermuda Triangle. Okay, so they notice that things have to be going back and forth over and over again. So the colonies are sending raw goods to England. Okay, England is sending manufactured goods back. And then they're sending guns and iron to Africa, and Africa is sending slaves to the colonies. So it creates this triangular pattern of trade that is occurring. Ninja, you need to remember, that basic triangle shape, you need to know that shape. And you need to know the colonies are sending raw goods and England is sending manufactured goods. Colony is sending raw goods, England is sending manufactured goods, and Africa is sending slaves. Africa is sending slaves. This is the beginning of the slave trade in our country. Starts here in the triangle trade. Cringy, the Caribbean is a part of this, but I would not necessarily focus on that for my studying. I wouldn't necessarily focus on the Caribbean separately. Yeah, just consider it part of the colonies. Just consider it part of the colonies. So triangular trade is occurring, and more colonies are growing. And then we get into mercantilism, because the King of England looks at this triangle trade and says, hey, I can make money off of that. And England is in desperate need of money. They're very broke and they need money. So they come up with this idea of mercantilism. And the whole point of mercantilism, and this was a warm-up question today, what is the purpose of mercantilism? The entire purpose of mercantilism is to accumulate wealth, to make money. The entire purpose of mercantilism is for England to make money. Sure, 2 examples of raw goods are lumber and tobacco. 2 examples of raw goods most used are lumber and tobacco. Mercantilism, mercantilism. But remember, we're not an English class. We're not going to grade your spelling. So long as you can sound out mercantilism, that's the most important thing. Okay. Helen, if you'll please refer to the beginning part of this study. We covered the House of Burgesses then, and we'll loop back around to questions at the end. Okay, so mercantilism is to make money, and it's predicated on what made the North American colonies so valuable to England. Yes, that's your other question from the warm-up. Good job. It's the taxes, the fact that they can tax them. Remember, if the whole purpose is to make money, you make money any way you can off of them. You're going to tax them. You're going to make them provide raw goods. You're going to sell them stuff. It all comes back to that mercantilism activity we did. Y'all provided us with the raw goods. You gave us Cheez-Its, and you gave us pretzels and Chex Mix and M&Ms, and those were the raw goods, all the bits and pieces. And then we manufactured them into this. And we are going to sell this to you at a high cost. Okay? Aveline, there wasn't a lot of choice about them supplying it, because that was their only way of making money, was to give England these raw materials. And they were getting paid. Like, in a perfect example, we would actually pay you 25 cents for every single box of Cheez-Its you bring. Okay? Every single box of Cheez-Its you bring. So, and plus, yeah, if you didn't give them the resources, then you would have no manufactured goods to buy. You're not going to buy any clothes. You're not going to buy any tables. You're not going to buy any tools. You won't have any of that because you didn't give them the raw materials to produce those goods. So colonies give the raw materials. England gives the manufactured goods. England charges a lot for them. And England is making money off of selling these manufactured goods to the colonies. And remember, just like in this, there was no way we could convince you to pay $3 for this. So we made a bunch of rules. That Superplay 470, you're allowed to leave whenever you want, okay? But we're going to keep going until we're done. There's a bunch of rules that say you have to trade with them. We're going to take away all your other options. You're not going to have any choice but to buy this, because you won't be able to get snacks anywhere else. That's what England did to the colonies. Okay? So colonies exist to help the mother country, in this case, England. And the Navigation Acts. No, Sparky, you can ask questions at the end. Just let us get through this information so that we're not here for 2 hours. The Navigation Acts are the rules that regulate trade. See, Gerke, good question. Why couldn't they just make their own factories? One of the Navigation Acts, one of the rules England made was you're not allowed to make your own factories. So just like in this, some of you were sitting there going, you know what, I'm going to make my own snacks and bring it and sell it on the down low. Well, we're not going to allow that. We're not going to allow you to do that. That's going to be restricted as part of our rules, part of our laws. So again, mercantilism is all about making money. Okay. The colonies exist to help the mother country, and the Navigation Acts are the rules that regulate trade. The rules that regulate trade. So they told the colonies, you can't trade with France, you can't trade with Spain. Eli, they didn't want to leave the country because they had just moved over to the colonies. Like, they just moved to the colonies. They don't want to move again. And don't forget, like, going to the colonies still gets them a ton of land. At first, what you guys have to understand is at first the colonies don't mind this. They're still making a little bit of money. They got all this land that they've never had before. They get religious freedom for the first time. They get to have their representative government in the House of Burgesses. They get to have their self-government with the Mayflower Compact. They don't have a lot of money, but that's okay. They were poor in England too. Now they're just doing fine in the Americas. And so they're happy with this at first. It's long term. The longer time goes on, the more and more they realize that what England is doing is unfair. And the longer the time goes on, the more they realize that England is passing more and more rules. And now I'm a bigger colony and I want to trade with France and England won't let me. And I want to trade with Spain and England won't let me. And I want to have my own factories and England won't let me. So that's the Navigation Acts. Okay. That's the Navigation Acts. Lisby, because the whole selling, because the taxes Like if I wanted to sell to France, then England would put a tax on my stuff, and that was another way they made money. Like they wanted the goods to create these manufactured goods. So don't get too caught up in what if, you guys. A lot of you are kind of going down these rabbit holes right now, okay, which are very interesting conversations. But when preparing for a test, you want to kind of focus your attention a bit. So don't think too much about the what if, what if, what if, what if. What you need to know is, for whatever the reasons, the circumstances that played out led to, from triangle trade, led to England passing these navigation acts and creating all these rules, these regulations, these laws, this legislation about who the colonies could interact with. About who the colonies could interact with. Okay. Spain and France were roughly the same distance away as England. And the Spanish and French colonies were actually closer than England. But again, they had the Appalachian Mountains, and that was a barrier, and other things going on. And there's a pride there. I'm English. I want to trade with England. Okay, there's a nationalism that affected their actions and choices. It affected their actions and choices. So just remember, mercantilism is about England making money. And you guys also have to remember, like, we get 2 days to teach all of mercantilism in the trade acts. I could spend a whole semester just teaching about mercantilism. So we try to keep it super simple and straightforward and not talk too much about the little details. So there is a bigger story there, and a lot of y'all are catching on to that, which is really cool. But just remember, don't get too sidetracked by some of those details that you forget the main point that we have simplified down for this instruction, which is mercantilism is about England making money. The colonies only exist for England to make money. The colonies give England raw materials. England sells manufactured goods to the colonies. You're not allowed to trade with France and Spain. Okay. The navigation acts are the laws that were written to regulate trade and commerce between the colonies and England. To regulate trade and commerce between the colonies and England. Okay. So those are what the navigation acts. They're just the laws. And you guys, I try to use the multiple words for the same idea, because on a test, they might write laws, they might write legislation, they might say rules, they might say regulations. All 4 of those words mean the same thing. Okay. If people traded with places other than them, and I'm going to move on after this, they would just, they would either tax them or fine them or put them in jail. Okay, it's smuggling. They have very restrictive laws. Laws that restricted trade. Laws that restricted trade. Okay, and that's mercantilism. One last thing I want to cover. One of the things we took notes on is the 3 different types of colonies. We're only going to talk about one of them. Okay, we're only going to talk about from one of them. All right. And that is joint stock colony. So a joint stock company is when a business wants to start a colony. Jamestown people moved because they were looking for gold. They were looking for gold. They thought they were going to find gold in Jamestown, and they did not. So, but they didn't want to go all the way back, so they just stayed there and grew tobacco. Eli, we're only talking about one, because the only one we've really learned about so far is Jamestown is a joint stock company. So we're just focusing on that for this test. For the next test, we'll talk about the 2 other types more. But for this test, we just want to focus on joint stock company. Yes, Jamestown is a joint stock company creation. Okay. So no jelly beans, Erica. So it's a colony that's run by a business. And the biggest thing is you have the business, the company, and you just got to think it's just like Shark Tank, okay? David, I will try a little bit, but just keep in mind that I'm trying to not make sure it's not too long, and you can always rewind it or pause it as you need to. It's a video and it works just like a video. All right. You have the company and the investors, and you have the colony. Okay. And the most important part here is just like in Shark Tank, this guy comes up with an idea. I'm going to make money. Okay. And the investors are going to give money to the company. And in return, the company is going to give them a share of the profits. Yes, once this is over, you can rewatch the entire thing. You can fast forward through parts you don't need, et cetera, et cetera. So joint stock literally means that we both are sharing ownership of the company because it was your idea, but I'm helping give you the money for it. It's a joint stock. If you actually think of the stock market that we have today, it's the same idea. I can buy a percentage of shares in a company, and in return for my investment, in return for my money, I get a share of the profit. So the investors give money, and the company gives back profits. The investors give money, and the company gives back profits. Yeah, they invest. Investors invest. All right. So we are, no, proprietary is when one single individual owns the entire thing. When one single individual owns the entire thing. Joint stock ownership is a company owns it, like a business. Yes, they essentially buy back their money. Ninja, last time, okay. What you have to understand is this. Spain went to the Americas in 1492. They found a whole bunch of gold. They went back to Europe and they were all like, OMG, I found this new place. It's got a bunch of gold. Business people in England were all like, dude, why don't we send some people over there to go get some gold and we'll pay them and they'll send back a bunch of gold to us. And everyone was like, wow, what a great idea for getting rich. Let's send some people over there to get some gold. So they go across the Atlantic Ocean, found Jamestown, and start digging for gold. They are looking for gold. The entire point is to get rich and make money. They don't find any gold. Okay. So they have to figure out a different way to make money. Okay. No, sweetie, you already had dinner. Sorry, thank you. So it's a different way to make gold, a different way to make money. They had to find a different way to make money, so they ended up farming. All right, and we are now fully open for questions. So refer to page 5. Your TEKS questions, whatever questions you don't think you can really answer from that is a great place to start with questions. Otherwise, any questions that you have, we will try to address now. Correct. If the company doesn't succeed, the investors don't get anything. Royal colonies and proprietary colonies matter, but not for this test. So don't worry about royal and proprietary for this test. We're going to worry about them later. This test, we just want to focus on joint stock company. Just focus on joint stock company. The page number, what page can we use for TEK 10A? Let me look up TEK 10A real quick. Put back here in my spiral. Locate Jamestown and Plymouth on a map. So in your notes, you should have that. So it's kind of two things. You're going to look at your notes on page 13 and 15 and compare that to your map on page 7. So in your notes, you should have that Jamestown is in the Atlantic coastal plain, and Plymouth is in the Appalachian Mountain region. Okay. So then you compare that to your map, and you can look on your regions map on page 7 and see, oh, that's where the Appalachian Mountain region is. That's where the Atlantic coastal plain is. Okay. A plantation is a like a kind of like a farm, but they're growing only one thing specifically to make money. So on a normal farm, you have maybe some apple trees and some wheat and some corn. You got like a bunch of different stuff going on. On a plantation, you grow one thing, you grow as much of it as you can, and you sell it for money. Okay, so plantation, you go one thing, you grow as much as you can, and you sell it for money. The tens questions, there's two tens questions. Do you want 10-C or 10-A? Jamestown is 1607. Ninja, do you want 10-A or 10-C? Plymouth is not a joint stock company. Plymouth is not a joint stock company. They are kind of a weird thing that happens because they're supposed to go to Virginia and join that group of people, but they get blown off course. So for about 40 years, Plymouth is like not anything because they're supposed to be part of Virginia and they got in the wrong place. I know, Teak, I just didn't know if you wanted 10-A or 10-C. Lily, I would focus on the Appalachian Mountain region and the Atlantic/Gulf coastal region. The Atlantic/Gulf coastal region. Yeah, tobacco and cotton are both excellent examples of cash crops grown on plantations. 10-C. Okay. Okay. Okay, give me just a second, you guys. We're asking. We got 5 questions here. Ninja, I'm still not. You said B and then 11B and then B. So none of that is 10. So B is what notable events happened in 1607 and 1620. That's Jamestown and the Mayflower Compact. Okay. The only way to remember 1607 is to memorize it. That's why it's called a hot date. You have to know 1607 is Jamestown. You have to know 1607 is Jamestown. Okay. 10-C, what are the lasting effects of physical and human geographic factors such as weather, landforms, waterways, transportation on the founding of the early colonies? The lasting effects is Jamestown grows tobacco, and then because of the tobacco, we have slavery. And the lasting effects in the Plymouth is up in the north, so they are not going to be farming. They're going to be doing lumber. They're going to be doing lumber. Okay. How did the Plymouth people make money? I don't really need to worry too much about that. Their goal was not to make money, so they didn't want to make money. They just wanted to survive. They just wanted to survive. So they were planting food and fishing a little bit, but not enough to sell, just enough to eat. You don't really need money if you have food and you can sow your own stuff. And so for a while, they're just sort of living and subsisting. We're not going to have to worry about how they make money for another about 50 to 60 years. Okay. We will try to go over the TEACS questions if there's time, but I'd like to focus. 12B, why did the plantation system develop and how does it relate to the transatlantic slave trade? So the plantation system developed because the farming land was really super, super good in the South, and they were able to grow lots and lots of tobacco, and that's how they decided to make money, because that was their goal. They wanted to make money, so they make money by selling. I'm just going to plant 200 acres of 200 football fields worth of tobacco, and then I'm going to sell all that to make money. So they have huge farms, plantations that grow one thing that they sell for cash. Because they were so big and it was hard work, they wanted slaves to do that work for them. So they brought slaves over from Africa as part of the triangle trade. That's the transatlantic slave trade, and slavery increased. Slavery increased, slavery increased, slavery increased, slavery increased. Okay. Do you need to know the rivers? Yes, I would know Ohio, Mississippi, Missouri. Okay, you may need to be able to identify Mississippi on a map. Ohio, Mississippi, Missouri. Is this on Google Classroom? You'll have to ask your teacher. It's I don't use Google Classroom as much as Mr. Boyko does. Why did some people from Plymouth never make it to? Did some people from Plymouth ever make it to Jamestown? No. They got land. They got a place to live. They were quite happy there. They were quite happy there. Okay, so they were happy to form their own little colony and have their Mayflower Compact and govern themselves and make their own decisions. A Navigation Act is a law that restricts and regulates trade between the colonies and England. So it's rules like you're not allowed to trade with France, you're not allowed to trade with Spain, you have to use English ships. It's Navigation Acts are laws that restrict trade. Laws that restrict trade. The rules for mercantilism, or the steps of mercantilism, or the 4 points of mercantilism, whatever you want to call them, you need to kind of understand what those are. You just need to understand the colonists are providing raw goods. The England is selling the manufactured goods, and then there's the laws, the rules for you can't compete and you can't trade with France and Spain. Oh, okay. There you go. Brocken will put this in his Google Classroom. Okay. Ninja, there's 3 different types of colonies: joint stock, proprietary, and royal. You need to know joint stock for this test. How many colonies do you know? Well, we've only talked about 2 so far. So you need to know 1607 Jamestown, 1620 Plymouth, Mayflower Compact. Those are the 2 you need. You guys are doing great. Lots of questions. We like it. Yeah, only one. You only need to know joint stock, which is all about the investors give the company money and the company gives the investors profits. They can't compete with England. They cannot trade with France and Spain. They can't compete with England. They can't trade with France and Spain. 1619 is the House of Burgesses. 1620 is the Mayflower Compact / Plymouth. So 1607 is Jamestown. 1620 is the Mayflower Compact / Plymouth. Those are the 2 you need to know. You just need to know that 1619, you just need to know House of Burgesses comes in the middle. It's the first representative government. We are going to talk about the House of Burgesses all semester long. It's going to come up over and over and over again because it's the first representative government. And everybody's all like, that's a good idea. We're going to copy that. A charter colony, every colony had a charter, because a charter is just a permission slip to have a colony. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but we're just focused on the joint stock colonies, which did have a charter. A charter is just a permission slip to have a colony. Royal, proprietary, and charter colony. Okay, so what Mr. Boyko is calling a charter colony is probably a joint stock company. A joint stock company. Aveline, if you're starting to get confused, don't read the comment thread. Just focus on the video. Representative government is when you elect someone to make laws for you. when you elect someone who makes laws for you. The Navigation Acts restrict all trade from the colonies with everybody. There's laws about everything. There's 29 different laws. So they say who you can trade with, what you're allowed to make, what ships you're allowed to use. There's a bunch of different laws. All you need to know is they all are restricting the trade of the colonies. Yes, the Navigation Act is the rules for mercantilism. That is correct, Sparky. The Navigation Act is the rules for mercantilism. This is what this will be available as a tool for every test. If this does not work for you, then do not utilize it. Some tests will have Quizlets, most will not. Because a Quizlet oversimplifies information. Plymouth, don't worry about the economy of Plymouth. That's not part of the main conversation with that. All you really need to know with Plymouth, the biggest thing with Plymouth is the Mayflower Compact. That is our focus with Plymouth, is the Mayflower Compact. No, as we will have a YouTube video for each test. We will offer a YouTube video for each test. Ayana asks, why did England put taxes on the colonists? To make money. England wanted money. The fancy social studies test way of saying it is to accumulate wealth. To accumulate wealth. Yes. MCSCSG, Mayflower Compact, Social Contract, Self-Government. Those all go together. The Mayflower Compact is a social contract that establishes self-government. Eli, they didn't have any money at the beginning. They have money at the end of this story. This is how they make all their money. They didn't have any at the beginning of this story. Also, if you had $1 million, wouldn't you want 2 million more? Ninja, I'm not sure what vocabulary you're referring to. There is a number of vocabulary you need to know for the test. So, yes, Jamestown is also self-government, but we don't use that phrase as often with them. With Jamestown, with the House of Burgesses, we tend to focus more on representative. Burgess, representative. Okay. Yeah, all the vocab is a lot. A lot. Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. Mayflower Compact is a social contract for self-government. Yes, Aubrey, all of the, now not every class received this, but for those of you who received the green topics review, okay, all of this is on there. This is something that only some specific classes received. Okay, but I'll show it to the camera one more time. You want to screenshot it. Yes, I know, Rithi. You don't need a green sheet. You're fine. Okay. Eli, only if you wanted it to study. Okay. This is the green sheet. You want to screenshot it. Only certain classes receive this. Only certain classes receive that. Okay. Yeah, FM review sheet. That's it. Okay. What's the religion tactic for the test? Okay, Rain, try out on for size. What early government is an example of representative government? Helen and I asked the same question, just for different directions. Ninja, this video will upload to YouTube as soon as we're done with it. So it'll be sitting there for as long as people want to go back and look at it. Okay. Ayana, yeah, I mean, right now, that's where we're focused on. Like I told my students, the history of the United States starts on the East Coast. So we're going to focus over there for right now. We're going to focus over there. Honestly, then you would take an hour and 12 minutes to do your test, and classes aren't that long. So I'm going to give this about another 3 minutes, and then we're going to wrap up for the evening. 1619, they make their first representative government. Rain, what's it called? What's the name of that representative government? Erica Jimenez, just hanging out and building people up. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's a delay. So like I'm reading your comments in real time, and then you don't even see me respond to your comments until like 30 seconds to a minute later. But yeah, that's correct, Lily. It's a apparently speedy mon, because it's about a 5-second delay if you're watching it live. If you started from the beginning 5 minutes after I started, then you're 5 minutes behind. Okay, I don't know. Because my hype man. Bye, Eveline. Cringy, no. Jamestown uses the House of Burgesses. Plymouth uses the Mayflower Compact. Jamestown uses the House of Burgesses. Plymouth uses the Mayflower Compact. My timer says an hour and 13 minutes right now. Erica Jimenez is a student from last year. She recommends you buy the flashcards, which will be available for sale in October. Don't worry too much about what those are right now. We'll explain it to you in a little bit. House of Burgers voted number 1. House of Burgesses is the first representative government. House of Burgesses is the first representative government. House of Burgesses is the first representative government. Thank you. speed him on for having good hygiene. We all appreciate it. Okay. The House of Burgesses is the first representative government, and we're going to copy parts of that for our U.S. government. But remember, that's in 1619, and we don't start our U.S. government for 260 years. So we're still over here in the 1600s. We don't want to get too involved in what's going to happen 200 years later. I'm glad it helped you. Cringy. Okay. All right, we are at an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to wrap this up now. Please remember that this will be posted immediately to YouTube. You can pause it, you can replay it, you can start from the beginning, you can go back to what you need. 19, the House of Burgesses, is on page, that's going to be pages 13 of your notes. Page 13 of your notes is House of Burgesses. Okay. Good night, y'all.